What I'm going to show you in this video is the individual parts, how they work together, and then explain why I've got 4 batteries instead of just 1 battery. It starts off really simple. That's the part I want you to remember. It always starts off simple, and then you can go as far as you want with it. Okay, it's April 2021 now. I've been living off-grid for about 4 years on the ranch. But before that, I've had experiences like motorcycling up the Alaska Highway. I've gone camping most of my life. I've owned 2 vans, motorhome, lived in the school bus for a while. So I was just thinking about all that stuff, and in the last month or so I've started writing a book based on my experiences all about living off-grid. And when I was thinking about it, a lot of off-grid and camping are similar. So there's a lot of things that I learned out here that I realized I already knew how to do from camping. And it seems like a lot of my living out here is camping, only it's camping in a house. So what I'm looking to do now is I'm going to create a series of videos that kind of describe some of the basic systems and how I do things out here. The next video is going to be about how I make power for living off-grid. You know, if you're just starting out, there's so much that you just don't know. You don't understand how it's going to work, or you don't know who to talk to, or you don't know what kind of systems to buy. So this will kind of give you an overview of the basics, and hopefully from that you'll have a better idea of what's even involved. I guess, you know, it's just kind of like, well, what would you want to know if you were just starting out? I've often said everything out here is harder. There's things that you just wouldn't even think of. Be going along and everything's good, and then all of a sudden something stupid happens and you're like, huh, alright. If you understand the systems, and especially if you built them yourself, you'll have a better idea of how to fix things. Because nothing's going to last forever, and the more you understand, the less scary it is when things quit working. On with the show, right? The old saying is, you don't really want a drill, you want the hole. So you buy the drill to make it easier to make the hole. That's kind of what I'm talking about in today's video. You probably don't care about generators or solar panels, or batteries or charge controllers or inverters. You just want to make coffee and have the lights and use your laptop. When we're living off-grid, everything is different. We don't have a power grid to plug into, for example, so we need to make it ourselves. The simplest way is to have a gas-powered generator. Just add oil, put some gas in, pull the rope, and it starts up. Plug in an extension cord and we have power. It's awesome. It's a bit noisy, and you do have to go get more gas once in a while. But a generator is really the most practical way to start. If we look at how much power it can generate, and the total cost of buying it, a generator is a bargain. But the generator is noisy, and you do have to put more fuel in. Before we move on though, having a battery to store power in is really the key to what we'll be talking about today. If you had a battery charger, and the generator, you could turn the generator off for a few hours and still have power in the battery. When the battery is low, then you could start the generator, recharge the battery, and also use the generator to make some coffee, which ends up using a lot of power. When the battery is charged up, just turn off the generator and you have enough power to run the lights and the laptop into the evening. That's much quieter. Okay, so let's start off with a simple diagram. In the diagram we have a battery and a light and some wires. Maybe it would be more practical to include a switch because our light will stay on all the time, but this works, right? Next, we'll show our generator and a battery charger to refill our battery. Just think of a battery like a bucket. When it's empty, we need to refill it. Next, we could replace or supplement our generator with a solar system. We'll keep the battery though, that's working good. So then we'll include a solar panel and a charge controller. The solar panel converts sunlight into electricity. I'm not going to get too far into theory, I'm just happy that they work. The solar panel could eventually overcharge your battery though, so we use a charge controller to automatically regulate the charge level. If the battery is very low, the charge controller can send in lots of power, at least all that the solar panel can produce. If a battery is overcharged, it can be damaged, so the charge controller regulates that. The goal is to fill the battery up as full as possible, safely, and as fast as possible before the sun goes down again. So that's the important parts. We have a solar panel to catch the sun. That sends power through the charge controller, which then refills or recharges the battery. And now our lights work. If we run out of sunlight or have too big of a load, we'll have to start the generator again. Or we will have to buy more batteries to store more power. Or we could buy more solar panels to catch more sunlight. Think of batteries as more storage and solar panels as more surface area to catch more sun in an hour. As we've all heard, it's easier to save a penny than to earn a penny. The same applies to power. Solar panels and batteries and generators can get expensive. If we can budget our power the way we should budget our money, maybe we can live well with a smaller system. The last important part of the puzzle is that we are dealing with two kinds of power. The solar panels and battery are producing and storing DC or direct current power. A battery may be rated at 12 volts DC, for example. But your household appliances use AC or alternating current, typically at 110 volts AC. That's what's in your wall plugs. The generator puts out AC power, so it's perfect for running your appliances. If you use the generator to charge the battery, you are turning AC into DC power to refill the battery. A battery charger is pretty inexpensive, like about $40 or so would get you a good one. The next part we'll need to consider then is called an inverter. This is kind of like the generator. It produces AC power. But instead of burning gas and making noise, the inverter is connected to your battery, and it uses the DC power stored in the battery and then produces AC power to run your household stuff. I can make coffee, run computers, run the microwave, the freezer, make waffles, and run my power tools, all using an inverter. The issue will be how much storage capacity I have in the battery, and how fast I can refill the battery from the solar panels, and also the size of the inverter. You can buy a 100-watt inverter that will be enough to run most laptops, or you could go up to a 5,000-watt inverter that can produce as much power as a good-sized generator. Like anything else, more capacity costs more. This leads us to common compromises. Do you need to make waffles and brew coffee at the same time? Then you'll need about 2,000 watts of power at the same time, and often we will want that early in the morning before the sun is even hitting the solar panels. Or we could do one at a time. Brew the coffee first, then when it's done, we can make waffles or boil water for oatmeal. Then it's only 1,000 watts at a time instead of 2,000 watts, but we're doing it for longer. First the coffee and then the waffles. If you're living with on-grid power, you don't even think about running everything at the same time. Off-grid, you are much more aware of the details, or you will overload the system, and then it gets very dark and very quiet. Okay, that's the basics. Off-grid, you don't have a power bill every month. But to get started, it's like you're buying all your power up front. The cost of the generator, the batteries, solar panel, charge controllers, and inverters can really add up. But if you start off with a simple system, you can spread that out. Depending on your budget, first, I would recommend starting with a generator. 2,000 or 4,000 watts will get you going pretty well. Then second, get some batteries and a battery charger and the inverter. Third would be the solar panels and a charge controller. By doing this in stages, you get to understand how things work, each system's strengths and limitations, and you'll have time to adjust how you look at power. The generator may cost you about $500, and it's the biggest producer of power. In the beginning, you will run it as your main power, but as you grow into solar, you will find you can go weeks without running the generator at all. As you get the batteries and inverter online, you'll learn how to budget your power. It becomes kind of a game. Can you go all day without running out of power before you have to start the generator? Then, when you get solar, you'll learn a new strategy. of when you can best run some loads. Making waffles for lunch is the best when you have more sunlight for power. Maybe you'll brew a coffee and save it in the thermos for tomorrow. Take advantage of more power in the middle of the day instead of trying to run the coffee maker first thing in the morning before the sun comes up. Everything off-grid is harder, but it's kind of cool to have some control of how you're spending your time and money. You can make more of your own choices, and that has to be worth something, right? Okay, thanks for watching. Okay, it's 7:50 in the morning on April 14th. So what I want to do today is do just a real basic how to get started with solar electricity and off-grid power. So this is one of my old batteries. The sticker up here says 8 of 2017, so that's almost 4 years old. I typically get about 2 years out of a battery. When I replace batteries, you take the old ones in and use it for core exchange, you get some money back. So what I want to do today, I'm going to set this up on a bench and just show you individual parts so you can see the wires going from one to the next, okay? Because this battery is just about completely dead, and it's already old. If it was a good battery, it would be in the box. So I got a multimeter, and just set it to volts. Positive, so I'll do red to positive, black to negative. 10.79 volts. It's been sitting for quite a while, and I haven't put a charger or anything on it lately. So let's just do that. Red for positive, black for negative. I'm going to plug it into an inverter that's not hooked up to the house right now. And we'll turn the inverter on. Alright, this shows 9.8 volts on here and 0% capacity. So I'm going to put that up to 8 amps or 15 amps. I'll just start it charging. There's a good chance that this battery is so bad it won't even take a good charge. So we'll just let that be for a while. This is the off angle. Usually you see it the other way. Because I've got 3 different sets of solar panels, I ended up with 3 different charge controllers. So here's one set, there's another, there's another. From that, I've got 2 of these going into one battery and 1 into the other 4 batteries. That's a brand new lithium battery there. It's not necessarily better than all 4 of the other batteries combined, but I think it's got more potential. On this side, just out of shot, is one inverter that's running the house now, and this is the second inverter that's running the battery charger. Okay, so we've got basically 2 completely separate systems right now. One inverter off of one battery, one inverter off of 4 batteries. Okay, it's way, and you see all this massive wires here. It's way too complicated. What I'm going to show you in this video is the individual parts, how they work together, and then explain why I've got 4 batteries instead of just 1 battery. If you have more batteries, you have more run time. You can run one load longer with 4 batteries than you can run the same load with 1 battery. It just, it kind of makes sense. I often compare electricity to water. Voltage is like pressure. The size of your pipe is how many amps you can pull. That kind of thing. There's kind of a correlation there. So if you're running a little skinny wire, you can run an LED light. That's like a little garden hose. If you need to run something like a big motor, then you need something more like a fire hose. Eventually the battery gets old and it just can't absorb a charge anymore. We're going to talk about 2 kinds of power today, AC and DC. AC power is what you're used to. House power. 110 volts here in the US. Simple wall plug-ins. You can plug in your coffee maker and everything is good. The other kind of power is more like what you have in your car, DC power. Typically you have a red and a black wire. Red is positive, black is negative. That shows 13.3 right now. That's coming off of the new lithium battery. And I'm using these screw terminals to make it easy to make connections. On this side, those little round connectors are called barrel jacks. And if we follow that wire up, this was kind of a temporary hack that just stayed. When I bought the Harbor Freight panels, they came with these kind of cool little lights. They're pre-wired with a switch, and so since that's hooked up to the DC, that's actually a pretty good amount of light. So since I was going to have DC anyway, when I wired my house, I pulled a couple DC circuits. The advantage of that is on the simplest level, I can always make lights work even if nothing else works. So as long as I've got some power in the battery, I can hit that switch and that light will come on. I've got one of those in each room in the house. So even if the inverter quits working and the whole rest of the house quits working, I can still turn on a light, which is kind of nice. Also, by having a DC circuit come into the house, I hooked up that LED voltmeter, and I can get kind of a basic idea of how much I've got left in the battery. You know, if it's 10 volts, that's not very good. If it's 13 volts, that's very good. It starts off really simple. That's the part I want you to remember. It always starts off simple, and then you can go as far as you want with it. When you buy a battery, make sure to get one that's got these terminals on top, okay? Not just the one that you're used to in your car, where, well, actually a lot of cars have terminals like that now too. So you want to make sure that it's got a nut that comes off, right? And then figure out what size that is. They aren't always the same size, but then you'll find some of these crimp-on terminals. Make sure that it fits, okay? So I've already got a couple of those made. So again, it would be one for red for positive and one for black for negative. And then the other end, it depends what you're doing, okay? So I'm going to just show you that for now, but if you put that on there and then tighten it down, then you'd have a good connection, okay? It is a beautiful day today. So far the wind is not howling. Now this isn't exactly an endorsement of something specific, but when you're getting started, you're probably going to want to go figure out what terminal sizes you need. So for instance, we figured out these are the ones that fit the battery. Okay. The other one I use quite a bit is these screw terminals, which go on, for instance, like that. The screwdriver, you can just make sure it's black and black. I'm not going to hook it up to anything, but you can just slide this in over the screw and tighten it down. Okay. Nice and solid. That's a good connection. That'll last permanently. You don't have to solder it or anything like that. And it's easy to take it off again. So these will strip the end off, and you can kind of set how deep it goes. And you just kind of squeeze down, strips it off, nice and easy. All right. And you give it a little twist, just to keep all the strands together. So you just slide it on there. I just stick it out a little bit so I can see it. This has got yellow on it, so I find the yellow on here. Give it a good squeeze. Usually both hands get it good and solid. Give it a tug, make sure it doesn't come off. Okay, that's good. Okay, now I've just made another connector. Okay. So you'll use your strippers to get the insulation off. Now if you don't want to go buy those, if you're not going to do this very much, I've spent years with just a little utility knife, carefully score the end of the wire and pull it off. Fine. You know, if you're going to be doing this kind of thing, it is really practical to be able to make your own wire connections. Okay. The other option though, for the bigger stuff, it's easier to just go buy it. So this is a wire for hooking up an inverter. It's actually not big enough for a big inverter. The biggest inverter wires that I've got now are about twice that big. You need a really big fat wire if you're going to run your whole house off of it. Okay, but for little stuff, this is fine. So you can buy these pre-made in different lengths, different diameters. If you're buying them for the inverter, get a red one and a black one so you can tell the difference, right? Some kind of a meter is handy. You don't necessarily need it but it's a real simple way to see if your battery is doing good, or if you've got power, or how much power you got. You don't have to get a really expensive one. It's just a good thing to have some kind of a meter. Really, you can start off small and work your way up. Just as a test, these are ridiculously small. They're Trickle Chargers. They put out just a little bit of power. I hooked all three of them together. The wire is coming together into this charge controller. The charge controller is putting the power through this wire, which is going into this battery pack. This is a 12-volt battery that I made. That part's not really important. This just has 12 volts in it, okay? So by using my screw terminals, I ran a connector to the battery, okay? Nice and easy. So solar is coming in, but right now it's not going anywhere. It's just going to the battery. It's not doing anything useful. This is the charge controller that comes with the Harbor Freight kit. Okay, so what I just wanted to show is a basic system could be this simple. You know, solar comes in, goes out to a battery, okay? From that, these connectors could hook up to that light that I had. So I'm gonna go grab one of those and I'll show you. Okay, this is actually the one out of the kitchen. Pulled it off the ceiling just for you guys. So this is labeled output. Okay, so we can just stick one of these in here. And then if I turn the switch on, nothing happens because there's a switch or a button on here that's labeled light. Okay, so if I turn this on, oh, and then I turn the switch back on. There we go. Okay, light's on, and then I can push on here, turn the light off. Okay. So I've got an option. I could either turn on my switch, or I could use this to turn everything off. So if you could have 3 different lights on here and just have one switch to turn them all off. If I ignored that, I could run a load from here because my charge controller is putting power through here to the battery. So this is connected to the battery, okay? So if I had something like an electric fan, I could just carefully touch the wires onto here because I don't want to put an end on here. So you just hold the wire onto one of the screws and then one on the other end. Not sure if that's obvious on the camera, so let's see if I can get it over here where you can see it. Trick is to keep my fingers out of it. Okay. Black on black. This is a computer case fan if you're curious. I got a whole bunch of them. Okay, so black on black, red on red. It spins so fast it's hard to see it's actually turning. You get the idea, right? So, if you had a bunch of DC powered things, DC powered lights, DC powered fans, you could totally do that with just a simple battery, charge controller, and some solar panels. Let me back up a second though, because honestly, when I first came out here, I had batteries like the big one that we're charging, and my generator, and I had rigged up some lights, but I didn't have solar yet. So you could do that. In fact, I've seen people do this, or you just buy a couple batteries, charge them up at home, go camping, run your lights off of the batteries until the batteries go dead, you know, and then the next time you go home, you recharge them again. So you don't necessarily have to bring all your charging with you. If you had a generator, you could use the generator during the day to recharge your batteries. And then at night, you would have power to run your lights and stuff without needing the generator running. So then at least it would be quiet. The last part of this is how do you make AC power? For AC power, you need this device called an inverter. And this one is 500 watts. It's got house power connectors on the output side. It's got an on-off switch. It's got a USB port, this one. And then on the input side, it's got, take the little plastic nuts off, and then it's got terminals that you can connect to the battery. Okay. Now I don't think I've got enough power in this little battery that I'm testing with to make this do much that's useful. But let's try it out just to see if it'll at least turn on. Okay, back again. So we've got our solar panels over there. They're running through a long cord, coming through the charge controller, coming through the screw terminal, going into the battery. All right. We actually have got 12.2 volts. We started with 12.1. So even though those are really small, it's a small battery and it is actually charging. Pretty cool. So then I went in the house, found a LED work light. I think that's small enough we'll get away with this. Okay. And these wires were already made, so they're the right size. So do one at a time. There's a trick I just learned on the internet. You learn a lot of cool stuff on the internet. I'll show you how to do this the right way, as opposed to the way I usually do it. Okay, so this is going to be undersized, so you would definitely not do this for very long. Alright. The battery's too small, the wires are too small. But if it's a small enough load, it kind of works out, right? Inverters have capacitors in them. Capacitors store energy. An inverter, when it's not connected to a battery, the capacitors are empty. If I just hook this to here, it'll have a really big inrush of power for about a half a second, filling up the capacitors. That sometimes is enough to trip up the battery. This is a lithium battery that I'm using. It's got a battery management system built into it that will trigger if it pulls too many amps. So that might be enough to shut the battery off internally. There's a circuit built into here. I'll flash his name up here. I can never remember his last name. The guy's name is Will. He does a lot of cool videos about solar power. So this is a 25 watt, 30 ohm resistor. I think I got that right. Anyway, so what he does, you connect the resistor to one side of the battery, and then you touch the other side to the capacitor. That'll still let the power go in, but it slows it down, so you don't fault out the battery. Okay, hold that on for a few seconds. Then when we hook it up, it shouldn't spark. Okay, no spark. If I had done that before, you do get a spark. And it's basically like arc welding. It'll sit there and the spark will burn the connectors. I've got a few batteries that I've done that to. So now that we're done with this, that's it. We don't need that anymore. Put that aside. Now I'm going to turn this around. I don't know if I got enough wire to reach that. Plug that in. It'll either work or it won't. That came on. How about that? Okay, so now we've got, which seems ridiculous in the daylight running a work light, but I've got that little tiny battery going through the screw terminal, powering the inverter, turning on my work light. Now how long will that last? I have no idea. We're down to 11.8 volts now. It won't last a long time, I'll just say that, okay? But at the same time, we are also still charging from solar, okay? And that's kind of a useful point because you can run a load during the day when you've got power coming in and take advantage of the fact that the sun is continuously topping off your batteries. So just to show that that's really doing what I say it is, you can just turn this off. Light goes off, turn this back on. Light comes on. See? So it's working. Okay, we can see that that's stopped. If I hook the battery back up, we'll do this in stages. We'll turn this off, hook the battery back up. This light just came on. Hook our solar panels back up. And then we'll turn this on. And there we go. It's working. How cool is that? And in the instructions you'll see this. Do not hook this inverter directly to your charge controller. The charge controller has the power output that can run little lights and fans, but not inverters. Inverters need much bigger wires. If I was doing anything more than this really small load, I would run a bigger wire between this and a bigger battery, okay? But for this scale, it's working, okay? Now, I'm not showing any circuit protection. I don't have any fuses or any breakers. Those are a good thing to do. However, the inverter has its own protection built in. If something, like for instance, if it pulls too much power, like it's a short, or if you just plug in something, like this is 500 watts. If I plugged a 1500 watt heater into here, it would just shut down. It's like, no, I'm not doing that. So it's like it's got its own breaker protection built in. It'll fault out, a little red light will come on, and it'll just stop working. Okay. Also, if the battery voltage gets too low, this will fault out and stop working. Okay. So you should have breakers or switches or fuses, but just to make it work, it doesn't need to be there. That's just a good idea to do it, right? But it'll work. You're on your own from there. So what you would do is you'd say, okay, I've got a 500 watt inverter. You go on the internet and you type it in. How big of a fuse do I need? And it'll take you probably straight to Amazon or eBay to about 500 people that'll sell you the same thing. Find one that's got a good price. That's probably, hopefully you get one that's close to you instead of coming from China. The ones from China could take a week or a month or two to get to you. If I live in Texas, I'll look for guys that are selling them in Texas, and I'll get them in 3 or 4 days. Okay. But the idea is you just find a fuse that's rated for the same power rating as your inverter, okay? And I would go just a little bit more. Out here, it's really annoying if I blow the fuse, because then I got to wait another week to get another one. So, buy yourself a couple of them if you're going to do that. I'll be honest. My system, I'm not running any fuses between the battery and the inverters. You should, I'm just not doing it. All right, so far so good. However, I do have plenty of wires that rats and mice have chewed into. So all it would take is somebody to chew through a wire, and that wire falls onto something else, and I'd have a dead short, and then I'd have a fire, and then none of my stuff would work. Okay? Okay, so with this running and this running, this says I've got 11.6, 11.7 on the batteries right now. All right, so if I turn the light off, that jumps up a little bit. If I turn this light off, this jumps up again, 11.9. If I shut the inverter off, up to 12 already. So your batteries will rebound as soon as you take the loads off, and that's something to keep in mind. If your battery is kind of questionable anyway, you'll start off, you think you got enough power to make coffee, and as soon as you hit the switch, the lights go off. You're like, it didn't work, So then you need a bigger battery or a smaller load. Anyway, I think that's kind of the basic, but basically this is how my house runs. I've got a bigger one of these, I've got a much bigger one of these, but I can run a coffee maker. Everything I've got in the house, I can run off of a bigger inverter. Obviously, you're not going to make a lot of coffee with that. Although, if you waited long enough, you could. It just would take a long time, right? Solar is like a dripping faucet. That's the best way I've heard of describing it. It'll take a long time, but eventually that dripping faucet will fill up your bucket. Once you've got a bucket full of water, it doesn't matter how long it took to fill the bucket, it's the same bucket. If you want to fill it up faster, you turn on the faucet. But if it's slowly dripping, it will fill up the bucket. So there's a few different ways. You can have more solar panels or bigger solar panels, and then the size of your bucket is how long can you run something. That's like how many batteries you have or how big your batteries are. So if you start off small, you could have one kit or one solar panel and one battery, and that'll get you so far. And then you figure out what did you run out of first. If you only needed to run your laptop 2 hours a day, you wouldn't need very much. One solar kit from Harbor Freight includes 4 of these panels. Now this is built onto something bigger. When you buy the kit, it's just the plastic panels, all right? So we'll get a kind of a close-up here. So that's what they look like. Okay, so that's 14 inches across, just a little bit less. They're probably made to a metric dimension. I don't have my metric ruler here. Top to bottom, it's about 39 inches. The wire sticks out at the top. Okay. So you got 4 of these together. Each one of these puts out 25 watts in peak sun conditions, probably in the lab in China somewhere. If you had a 100-watt light bulb and you wanted to run it for 4 hours at night, okay, and we'll ignore the fact that there's efficiency at play, because every time we make power and convert power and store power, we're losing some power. Okay, so if I get 100 watts coming out of here, by the time it goes into the battery and then I turn it into AC power from DC power, I'm losing. You know, so I'm not going to get 100 watts back out again. If this is 100 watts, you know, the 4 panels will give me 100 watts every hour. So if I can run them all day, let's say I get 6 hours of really good sun. From sunrise to sunset, we get sun. But if we look at the shadows right now, okay, this is about 9 o'clock in the morning. The sun is almost perpendicular to the panels. The panels are facing south because most of the sun will come from the south throughout the day. Okay, but in the morning and at night, these panels are aiming south, so the east is this way and west is that way. So the first hour of the morning, you know, the sun has been up since 7. It's 9 o'clock now. We're getting some sun, but it's almost the wrong direction. Okay, so that doesn't really count. By 10 o'clock, the sun is high enough that it'll be hitting the panel enough to be useful. Okay, and by 2 or 3 o'clock, it's then gone past the panel, and again, it's not as much power. Okay, so let's say we got 100 watts of panels. We'll probably get 6 hours of usable light, so we'll get 6 hours times 100 watts. Now I'm going to quit doing math in my head here. But if it was straight up 100% efficiency, if we had 6 hours of 100 watts coming in, we could probably run a light at 100 watts for 6 hours at night. If we had 2 lights, we'd only run them for 3 hours. If we had 3 lights, we'd only run them for 2 hours. If I wanted to run my laptop, it uses about 100 watts. Now I could sit there in the daytime and run my laptop, and the panels would keep up to the laptop, but I wouldn't be able to charge the batteries. Basically what you end up needing is more of everything. But in the beginning, it's hard to know how much more and how much of anything. And then the size of your batteries is how much you can store. All right. So I've got 4 panels back there, and there's 12 more of those here. That's what I bought with my own money. And then since then, I was lucky enough to have people donate me panels. So Houston Firefox, a viewer and great supporter of the channel, had some leftover panels he wasn't using, so he gave me these, and then later on he also gave me those. That's basically like catching more water, right? It's the same as catching water off your roof. If you have more roof, you catch more water. If you have more panels, you catch more sun. What that can mean, with more panels, my batteries are fully charged sooner. And then if I want to run longer at night, I need more batteries. Okay. When I started off, I had 4 Harbor Freight kits. I actually started with 1 and then added another one and then added 2 more later. All right. With 400 watts coming in and 4 deep cycle batteries like this battery, that gave me enough that I could make coffee in the morning, I had lights at night, and I could run my deep freeze for about 4 hours during the day because I had enough power coming in during the day to run the deep freeze during the day. And that's kind of how it starts. Now here's a clever shortcut that the old people taught us. You know, your parents and your grandparents. A penny saved is a penny earned. That totally makes sense when you're thinking of off-grid power and solar. If you can save power, for instance, if you took all your old light bulbs out and put in LED light bulbs, your 100-watt light bulb just became about a 7-watt light bulb. So that's really probably the most important thing. Now, I guess it depends on, if you've got more money or not. You could go buy just a massive amount of solar panels and a huge battery and a giant inverter. Or on my end of the scale, I was looking at how small can I make everything. I was running my basic loads on 400 watts of solar. So when you look into, this scary pile of wires and clutter, yeah, that's just awful. Some of that I could make neater. However, I've been changing things and testing things so much that it's just easier to leave the wires a little bit long so that I can move things around. None of this is really ideal. But yeah, you could definitely scale this down. This doesn't have to be like this. But think of it like I said before about the dripping faucet. You're charging your battery all day long so that in the evening or whenever you've got enough power to do that one thing you need. You can do a small charge for a few hours and then you could run a big load for a few minutes. So let's say you need more power than what you can easily do with solar. Now obviously on this little one your options are pretty limited. But even with this bigger stuff, I struggle still to do laundry with this. That just can't put out enough amps to get the thing into spin cycle. I can do half of the laundry cycle off of solar just fine. But when it goes into spin, that pulls a lot of amps and my inverter trips out. So then I got to start the generator. So why wouldn't you just have the generator and nothing else? Well, there's a couple reasons. When I run out of gas, I have to go buy more. But when my batteries are dead, I just wait until the next day the sun comes back out and I recharge. So as long as I stay within my power budget, even on a cloudy day, I get some power. It's not as much, but I get some. But if I need more power, that's when I use the generator. My generator is my backup weapon. It's like, well, okay, I need laundry once a week, once every other week. Okay, so I'll start the generator for a few minutes. In fact, I'm at the point now where I know how long I need to run the generator to do laundry, and I do solar as much as I can, and then I come over here and I move the cord over to the generator, run the spin cycle, and finish the load there. The next load I switch back to solar and I do it again. I'm on a bicycle. The gas station is 15 miles away. So the more I can run solar, the less times I have to go on the bicycle to buy a gas for the generator, which seems like all kinds of wrong. But when you need it, it's hard to beat it. That generator is rated at 4,000 watts. I think it'll do 3,000 watts continuously. My Harbor Freights are the smaller plastic framed ones. That's 400 watts. These silver ones are 320 watts. And the big black ones are 240 watts, but they're 60 volts instead of 20 volts. If I look at it at the battery, the biggest ones, I tested them all on the same day with the same meter. I was getting about 17 amps a charge out of those, 15 amps out of the little ones, and 16 out of here. The three sets of panels combined are over 45 amps of charge. Okay. The battery charger I was using this morning is a 15 amp charger. So these put out quite a bit of power. So I can refill the batteries really quickly off of solar now. Okay. But if I need more, you can't beat one of these. The Harbor Freight kits were over $100 a kit for 100 watts. This can put out 3,000 watts continuously for $400. Okay. So for starting out, it's really hard to beat getting the generator first because it can do the biggest loads. And then as you get time, or if you had the money all at once, I would still get the generator first because there's sometimes you still need it. But just keep it for a backup and then set yourself up to run on solar as much as possible. My other recommendation that I've made a few times on this channel is to start small if you aren't sure. And then learn how to conserve. Like I said earlier, saving watts is way easier than making more watts. Penny saved, penny earned. Okay. So if you can learn how to live with less power first, then slowly bring your solar panels up to where they match. And I also mentioned earlier on another video, exceptional days. The only time I run the generator now is to do laundry or when I'm welding, because welding takes way more power than I've got for solar power. However, when I'm on a welding day, I still run all of the grinders and chop saws on solar. So I only start the big generator when I'm welding. I've got a bigger one than this. Puts out 9,000 watts. This one isn't quite enough to do welding on. Right? This one cost about $400. The 9,000 watt generator I think was closer to 1,000. I don't remember exactly. Prices change. Generators are drop dead easy. You plug them in, plug your load into it. I could walk out here, start it up, plug my coffee maker directly into it and make coffee. Some of the better generators, the ones that are all like have a plastic shell around them, are much quieter. They use less fuel and they put out cleaner power. As far as the quality of the power itself, you don't really think about it from house power, but these ones can put out kind of noisy power, which is harder on some of your electronic devices. So if you can afford it, get one of the inverter-based generators. They use less fuel and they typically are quieter and are better quality. These are the cheapest ones. They put out a lot of power. Pretty easy though. Make sure it's got some gas in it. Check the oil once in a while. Switch it on. There's a lever for choke. It's pretty warm right now. Usually 1 or 2 pulls will get her going. But they're noisy. But yeah, for just getting started, you put that on the end of a 100-foot cord far enough away from your cabin or your camper. It's not too bad. But if you put it behind something, like a little wall to deflect the noise or something, or behind a bush so you didn't have to hear it as much, once you're inside, it's not too bad. If it's right next to your window, yeah, you'll probably smell the exhaust once in a while and you'll hear the constant noise. You never get to like it. You get used to it, but you never like it. A couple gallons of gas in that will run all night. So if, for instance, if you were in really, really cold weather, like here, it doesn't get cold very often. So you'd have a choice. You could run electric heat with one of these. You could fill it up before you went to bed, and it would probably run all night before it ran out of gas. Okay. That would keep you warm. Come out in the next morning, refill it, start it up again. Or go buy propane and run your propane heat. The last part of that, what I did when I first came out here, this is the second one of those that I've had. The first one wore out. This one has lasted a lot longer because I already had solar by then. But what I was doing is I had that, the battery charger, and a couple old batteries. All of my lights were running on DC. I also had an inverter to run my computers with. But I could run the generator for 2 or 3 hours, run my deep freeze to get it cold, so I at least have cold drinks. I wasn't really keeping food in it, but I had the deep freeze running just to cool off the water that I was drinking. I'd recharge the batteries and I'd make coffee while it was running, and then I'd shut it off, and then I'd have relative quiet. And then I had enough power in the batteries to run my lights at night. Okay, and I could run a laptop off the batteries also. And the same batteries then got used with solar. So, that's kind of the idea. But I think, something I had said when I first got solar going, I had probably $1,000 invested in power. $400 generator, 4 batteries that were about $100 each, and Harbor Freight solar kits were $100 or $150 each, something like that. Wait for them to come on sale. Yeah, I had over $1,000 invested, but then I didn't have a power bill. So you pay for your power up front. That's the last thing you got to remember. Nothing's free. Nothing about living off grid is easy. if you could just be plugged into the grid, your power would work most of the time, you know, unless there's a big storm and then everybody loses power. That's kind of something to think about. Out here, you know, like this was 2021, Texas had massive grid failures when they had that big storm come through. I was like, well, okay. I walked out here with my broom, swept off the solar panels because they had snow on them. I don't think I even started the generator then. I had enough power on solar still. I had my propane for heat, and I really didn't care. And I felt bad for my friends in Houston that didn't have power, but being a little bit self-reliant gives you options. The batteries will last about 2 years and then I have to replace them. The new lithium battery I got is probably good for 8 or 10 years, so that helps a lot. It's about 5 times as much money, but it should last at least 5 times as long. But yeah, none of this is easy. None of this is inexpensive, honestly. You know, you're going to have to build your house, or you're going to have to buy an RV to live in or something. You're going to need to make your own power. You're going to need your own water systems. You know, that box has a 1,500-gallon tank that's only got a couple hundred gallons left in it because I live in the desert and I got to wait for it to rain. Or you have to haul your water from town, you know. At least you can make your own choices. So that's basically it. I just wanted to get a shot of the generator on the end because you really should have at least 2 kinds of power. And some of this is good if you had, you know, if you're living on grid. Nice to have a backup. Okay, that's about it for this week. This is one of a series of videos that's also supporting the book that I'm writing this year for April 2021. I've got a bunch of chapters online already. Be sure to check that out. The link is down in the description. And be sure to subscribe. And if you like the video, click on the like. And I'll see you on the next one. All right, thanks for watching, and bye for now.